Well, hopefully we'll have some more folks showing up in a little bit. We might as well get started so we can keep things rolling. For the September 26th meeting of the Delaware Shade Tree Commission, we'll start with roll call.
Ms. Brewster, Mr. Buck, Mr. Carey, Mr. Glissman, Ms. Schaefer. Here.
Finally.
Mr. Wober,
Present.
Ms. Woodmeek.
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Wright.
Here.
And Chairman Olin.
Here.
Is a motion to approve the absent members appropriate? Have we heard from them?
We heard that Mr. Glissman, Mr. Buck, and Mr. Carey were not going to be available.
I hereby move that we excuse them all.
Okay.
So a bunch of them.
Second and vote.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Woodmeek?
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Wright?
Yes.
Chairman Olin.
Yes. Okay, so then on to the approval of the motion summary for the meeting held way back in July 25th, 2017, as recorded and transcribed. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move that we approve the motion summary. Second.
Okay, vote.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Wober?
Yes.
Ms. Woodmeek?
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Wright?
Yes.
Chairman Olin.
Yes. Okay, there's no public here tonight, so we can discussion of Chapter 1168 Tree Preservation Regulations of the Planning and Zoning Code.
Okay, so we've received all the comments. I just have a few questions before. What I'd like to do is kind of put all these comments with the code so we could kind of track the changes and then get that back to you so that you could say like, yeah, that or nay on this. And
Yeah, what you sent us was just the straight up
code.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And so I've got your comments, Paul. So, but one of the questions I had was on the first portion of it.
Yeah.
On 116801 under purpose, there was, I'll just read the sentence. These regulations are established in order to recognize the vital importance of growth in the ecological system while allowing for reasonable development of lands in the city of Delaware. We wanted to define reasonable development. I think that was one of the comments that came up.
That was one of the questions.
What were you thinking on that? I mean, because and it's kind of a broad term, but I think it's probably broad kind of on purpose because it kind of gives some flexibility. But I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit and see if you could help me define a little bit more what you're looking at there.
You want to go ahead?
Well, I want to say that I don't think it's up to us to define reasonable development, but I think reasonable development as not warranted, as decided by the city council or the administration. You know, they're ultimately the ones that decide what development moves forward and what doesn't.
Right, and that's why I think they have reasonable development, like, you know, kind of a, so that they can decide, like you're saying a little bit. So that's why I don't know if what you kind of meant by defining reasonable development a little bit.
Reasonable development is determined by the council or something like that.
Okay.
But it becomes a catch-22, a pretzel logic, a catch-22 circle. The city council doesn't decide in isolation. No, they decide in consultation with the public. So I'm sure they would value, they would appreciate input. Thank you.
But they're ultimately the ones that would take a vote.
Ultimately,
so I guess that's what I was getting at. I don't think it's our role to define in this particular chapter what reasonable development is.
Yeah, we can make recommendations as we have on what should be in Chapter 1168. But the representative of the EIA is going to have different definition of reasonable development than someone from Sustainable Delaware.
But again, they're not going to define reasonable development.
Okay, so how about this? These regulations are established in order to recognize the vital importance of tree growth in the ecological system and as it affects development of the lands in the city of Delaware, or something like that. Not even just to remove while allowing for.
See, I guess I find the reasonable development because it kind of gets back to what you're saying is we've got planning commission looking at this. We've got, well, Shade Tree will probably look at plans that come through, and, you know, reasonable development is, you know, if you could define a lot of different things as not reasonable development also.
Right, right.
And so I think there's some flexibility as being as reasonable development. It's kind of a hard one to define. I mean, we don't want to get into specifics and saying, I think being a little bit broad leaves some interpretation from the commissions that are reviewing the plans.
Well, that's true, and that's why when I wasn't real specific, I just asked an open-ended question on that part, but then in the follow-up, I was more specific on also including the following benefits.
Oh, yeah.
So that they are also kept in mind when development is taking place. And this is new information, it's newly researched, and as I mentioned in the next paragraph, I can provide citations on the research that support these points. So maybe it's the idea is to get the big picture on the benefits of trees and the benefits to the community, both monetary, both qualitative and quantitative. And reasonable development, then it would follow, would be development that includes trees that, you know, enough trees and greenscape, natural vegetation and so forth that make that possible. But it's not going to be real.
Well, and A, B, and C below that help define reasonable development also, I would think too. And I think that's kind of their purpose there also.
Right, yeah. So I agree with Susan. I don't think that reasonable development, I guess looking back now, I mean, it was a red flag for me initially, but yeah, I'm not sure how to exactly change that now, actually.
Well, here's a totally different proposal. I mean, this is a difficult philosophical question.
Yeah.
We could debate it all night, you know, and not ever come to any conclusion. But Delaware is a member of MOPSI, and I think MOPSI might be helpful in defining what a balanced growth, you know, and reasonable development is. So they might be able to provide a definition that that we could benefit from. I'm not sure, but you know, I think MOPSI has done some excellent work, and they are a good resource to consult.
And that's a good idea, but also I agree with that as something to look into. But I also agree with Susan in that you know, what do the folks in the development department, how do they define reasonable development? Because that's what we need to know, because we're advising city council and we're working on plans that are being initiated and then implemented by the development department. So what's there?
I would think they would refer to this code like it's mentioned A, B, and C. I mean, if you read those outline items, they kind of help. You'd help define that in my interpretation of this. And if there was something we wanted, and those items you brought up earlier, the 8, 9, 10, and 11 under A, Paul, that's in there. But
Yeah,
was just thinking if there's a different, a D that you wanted to add to this to help define reasonable development, maybe?
I can't think of anything right off the bat right now, but I think we should
Okay.
get some more ideas from a wider number of stakeholders. And I think Tom's idea is good, and I think we do
Okay.
need to hear from, like Susan says, what city council's definition, what's the development, the folks in development, what do they think, and really, it'd be nice if we were here discussing this too, actually.
Well, what I'll do is I'll put all these comments in there and I'll send that around to them.
Yeah,
Their
I'd
comments
like to
on
hear
there.
from as many people as possible on this,
Okay.
from all the stakeholders. What the heck is reasonable development? Maybe we should make it an essay contest for the Gazette, for the citizens of Delaware to write what they think reasonable development is, because they're the ultimate stakeholders here.
Well, this is a timely conversation because the city council is now debating the next CIP for 2018 through 22nd. And if you look at that document, there are some interesting questions. For example, has the city grown too fast? Have we as a city overextended ourselves? Because we are now in a position where we cannot finance, residential streets, keep them up, maintain them. We are falling behind. There's simply not enough money there.
That
And
always
so,
happens with this type of.
and that's related to this question here. What is reasonable development? Maybe, the pendulum needs to swing back a little more to the center. Let's maybe consider growing a little slower rather than too fast, because you want to keep up, with infrastructure and green space and so on.
And there's lots of research that's been done that demonstrates that traditional suburban development has been taking place since the 60s, doesn't pay for itself. Long-term costs are created that are not on the books at the time that the development takes place. They don't put those long-term costs on the books. So there's a quick, a quick shot of cash from development, and it's very attractive in the short term, and we get a big burst, and then the party's over and the long-term costs start showing up. So it would be good to find out from other people, yeah, Tom's right, we gotta sit back, catch our breath, and evaluate, are we doing this right? It's been like the Oklahoma land rush since I moved here 25 years ago.
Okay, I'll see if I can get more, but I mean, I would, again, I'm gonna circle back to what I was saying. I think A, B, and C are help define reasonable
they do.
development, and
They provide the context.
especially in the tree preservation regulations. I mean, I don't want to go beyond that. I
Right,
mean,
yeah, that's
talking about
outside our jurisdiction.
Because that's a broader, as you mentioned, that's a broader philosophical.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with you there, and I would want to include the 4 points that
Yep,
I
they're
have added.
I've got those included.
Okay, great, and if you want to see the citations, I can send that to you.
I think we're fine on those.
Okay.
That's not a problem adding those. It's,
Yeah,
if that comes up later, someone may ask for that, but,
yeah, I can provide that if somebody wants to see the
okay.
research on
Well,
it.
I will put all these together and then I will,
Northern research.
I will get comments from staff and then, we'll have that in next month's board packet.
Well, what's the date for that next meeting that this kind of stuff is going to be covered?
Our meeting or
For the city council. or-
Until you make a recommendation to the city council, but I wanted to get all the comments on one sheet
Okay.
so that the board could, make the recommendation with that sheet on there. So October 24th is our next Shade Tree Commission meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna look at that document with all these
Yep,
recommendations.
and then I'll see if I can get comments from Dave Eflin and have him take a look at it too.
I'm looking at, you said ABC here, sort of defines what the purpose of this is, and you asked twice, is there anything else to add? Should there be a D or something?
Right.
Mhm.
And I think the one thing that's missing, and this is probably just because these regulations are so dated, it's a reference to, we talk about trees, but there's no reference to an urban forest, which I think that's sort of a bigger picture.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would like to sort of, I don't know if we need to look for all the ways we can use the word urban forest rather than city trees, but that's sort of what I'm feeling that's missing, a holistic.
Well, in the ecological system, in parentheses, urban forest, we can include urban forest in that very first paragraph, somewhere,
Yeah.
somewhere up there. And then, you're right, it's not just trees, and I thought of this too, but I never really verbalized it. All right, now down to B, for instance, to promote the preservation and replacement of existing trees and wooded areas in the urban forest in such a manner that the benefits listed in A above are realized, just so that the focus starts to become away from individual trees on the side of the road to what they're talking about in the very first paragraph, the ecological system. So I think the term urban forest is more useful
Yeah.
than just talking about trees.
I think that's a good point that you brought up, and I guess when I think of urban forest, I also think of,
Private.
well, not necessarily
Oh.
private, but more, I guess linear too, like that can be linear and connect areas.
Oh,
More
Yeah.
like-
Corridors.
corridors.
Right,
Green
some
corridors.
corridors and promoting that, I guess, because I think that's one
Corridors is
thing.
very key, very key.
Yeah,
From an ecological point of view.
Do
right.
you feel like if we tried to use urban forest in here, that it would make this ordinance look like we're trying to promote this for private land? I mean, the forest includes
No.
both the public and the
No, I don't
private.
think so.
Okay, okay.
I think it's a good point.
You're using the term urban forest in Columbus a lot more,
Yeah.
for instance, down there. And I think we should start incorporating that here too.
I didn't bring a copy of our original charter, but I think it does refer to urban forest as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I think that would be a good addition.
Yeah, we haven't touched on the corridor thing yet, but that will be a good topic to discuss for future planning. And that would include more than just, that would be real proactive, I would think.
Okay.
Trying to set
Well, let me try
aside-
to take a stab at that with some language that
Okay.
and maybe also include some of those corridors and linear forest too. That kind of make up that, but tie them all into that urban forest theme that kind of, because you're right, that we don't really touch on that.
And I think it's just, that's the term we've grown to use. It wasn't used so much whenever this was made. I don't know. Probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
So the only other question I have about this part is this would be on the second page, under applicability, letter A, second paragraph. And we had talked about this before, but the wording says prior to the date this provision takes effect. So does that grandfather, is that talking about the original ordinance or whatever, the original date, or would that then be?
04 or back when we became a Tree City USA.
Well, that's my question. If we make these significant changes, does that reset that date?
Oh,
Or is that when the original ordinance was passed? Looks like maybe
Because
before.
there's several references to when this was passed, like, there's been obviously some changes to it, as you can see
Yeah,
at the bottom of B. So, so maybe we need to define date.
we could, like, let's just assume this was going to pass through council by December. So we could say effective January 1st of 2018, perhaps.
Right. And maybe have a reference up on under date that
Yeah.
what they were using. Because if you go down there, like there's ordinance past 5302, one past
Yeah,
81202, one past 61404. There's quite a few of them. Okay. I need to get with Dave Eflin on that one for sure. Okay. All right. Thanks.
and then, for 116805A1, can we put city arborist as the person who makes those decisions and not?
Yeah, I've got all your comments, Paul, so I will put those in there.
Okay.
Yep,
okay.
I've got them all in there.
So
I'm
we don't
gonna
need to
put
go
those-
through all that.
Nope, I've got them all, and I'll make sure, I've already made sure they're in there, so
Okay.
when you get the next copy, it'll have those in there, and I'll point it out in different color or something like that.
All right, thank you. And then the fee is gonna be determined at, when's the city council meeting where they will determine the fee schedule?
Will that be December or January?
I think it's part of the budget.
Yeah, so it could be even earlier, November maybe.
The budget's submitted in the middle of November, I believe, the
15th, I
15th of
think.
November, and we haven't set up what budget meeting times.
But it has to be passed by the end of the year, right?
It'll be passed, I think, 22nd of December.
I would like to request that we're all given like a month's notice before that meeting so that we can make arrangements to be there.
By the time you get to that meeting, all the discussion's going to be already done.
Oh, well, I guess the question I should be asking is, how can we have input into the fee for?
It would go with,
And I would make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll just include what I have written here then? or-
Yeah, but I think I would make a recommendation to city council so that gets included in the fee schedule. What the proposal for is, I think that would be wise just to do that, just to get that on record and send that forward to council so that they can include it in the fee schedule. So when the fee schedule is finally approved, that input will be put towards that.
Okay, what's your recommendation gonna be?
Well, right now we have $100 per inch.
Yeah,
Is what and it's kind of been, I don't want to get into it again because we rehashed that, but that's still what we're maintaining right now. I know you had mentioned $115 per inch based off of, inflation or that. And then one of the things we talked about was, what does it cost us to what's the high end that it costs us to put a tree in? And what's the low end it costs us to put a tree in? And do we want to go somewhere in between there? So that we have an average price in there, per inch. So I guess I would recommend more something like that because, again, I don't want to talk about.
do you have a number?
What can we come up with a number now, Doug?
I think that the $100 the cut price is more reasonable.
So just stick with 100?
Yes.
I concur. I would hesitate to go up in light of the pushback we have heard from private developers. I would also hesitate to go down. No, so I think, if it's okay with you, I hereby make a motion that the Shade Tree Commission recommends that the fee remain at $100 per, the replacement fee remains at $100 per caliber inch.
I'm good on that. As long as it's solid and it's not gonna be fudged.
No, I think it's going to be more solid with the recommendation and it going into the fee schedule.
Right, right. Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds good.
Do
We need
a
a s-
motion?
I made a motion. We need a second and we need to vote.
I second, and you can have a vote on that?
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Wilbur?
Yes.
Ms. Woodmead?
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Wright?
Yes.
Chairman Olin?
Yes. Yeah, especially if Doug's fine with it and it's working, don't mess with something that's already working.
But then again, you'll have, every year we can revisit that and,
Yeah.
and
Understood.
being in the fee schedule like that, it's something that can be revisited, so.
It just, trees, the cost of the actual trees has not drastically changed over the years. So the cost to the developer to plant the new trees hasn't drastically gone up either, especially when they're doing, well, most of them are doing a lot of, you know, they do the landscape on the house, and the trees are part of that landscape that they do with the house. So,
Yeah.
sometimes I look at, because we charge separately if say there's an accident, you know, and someone breaks out a tree, you know, sometimes you look at that and you go, if I was a citizen looking at this, you're asking me to pay $1,800 to $2,000 for a 3-inch caliber tree.
Yeah,
And it's, you know, it's just kind of crazy.
yeah.
So if you go up, it's, I mean, it's just going to make that number even crazier.
Yeah, the 115 I came from, that was just based on the general rate of inflation since '08 or whenever it was the last record of us charging $100 per caliber inch. But Doug, if, as you say, that general rate of inflation is not affecting the more specific market, which is wholesale nursery trees, then we don't need to apply that. So we'll stick with the 100. Okay, anybody have any other comments then on, any other questions from you, Ted?
No, that was the main thing I wanted to cover, and I think pretty good right now.
Well, I was just wondering, you know, do we have, maybe this is a question for Doug, concerning the 2-year maintenance period after planting replacement trees. Did you mention that that when you notice some trees that aren't doing well after that 2-year period, and you speak with the landscapers, whoever is responsible for planting those trees, that generally they don't have a problem with?
After the 2-year period?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, they won't replace them after the 2-year period. I mean, there's some special circumstances, obviously, we go through that, you know, or if we need them to add a tree, because they did meet the total number of trees in the development because of spacing of signs or lights or from the plans that you see, you know, we can work with them and get them to work with us. But generally, for the most part, after their 2-year period, I don't even ask them.
Okay, because, well, the reason I ask is because 1168.09G, that's where they say after the 2-year maintenance period, that section states, all trees not exhibiting a healthy, vigorous growing condition as determined by the city's inspection and hopefully that's you and not somebody else, shall be replaced at the expense of the developer or builder.
That's within the 2-year span.
Oh, I thought that was after. I thought that there was an inspection after 2 years.
No, if you look at yeah, go ahead, Doug.
They're like, okay, just so we can put it kind of in a timeline here. We're getting ready to put in 2017 fall trees right now.
Yeah.
They're gonna go in and, if that tree does not look good or has failed by fall of 2019, they will replace that tree. That's its 2-year warranty. And then that tree will have a 2-year warranty after that too. After they put it in, if it fails again within that 2 years, it continues.
Oh, so it's during the 2-year maintenance period that the inspections are made then?
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Two
I
growing
know, basically, I
seasons.
mean,
Two growing
student
seasons.
mortality checks a
Okay.
year.
Okay, got it. That's good. I'm good with that. Okay, that's all I have. Is anybody else? Okay, then we can move on to the arborist report.
Okay. This is for August and September, since we didn't have a meeting in August. 9 large caliber trees were removed, 17 smaller ones were removed. 6 trees were removed from Oak Grove Cemetery. All of the process is still going on. We approved 82 trees in this period of time. Most were due to safety issues such as stop signs, traffic lights, traffic signal visibilities, vehicle strikes, or pedestrian clearances. Inventory, we currently have a backlog of 221 trees. That includes all trees that were removed pre-2016, 2016, to date in 2017, and additional trees to replace ones removed along Ohio Health Boulevard and Glen Parkway. Plans are, at this time, with those trees, will be planted utilizing the tree fund monies. So obviously, the pruning is still, the pruning project will continue forever. Hopefully it's a 5-year maintenance program. Tree mortality and new development tree counts been completed and delivered to the developers. And so this fall, we should be planting 282 new trees and replacing 59 trees. Those two numbers together, we just added 500 trees in the fall of 2017. 503 trees we added to the city's landscapes.
Any comments about that last sentence? Oak trees and honey locusts seem to be the majority of the replacements.
It's just, I think, a trend I'm starting to see with the honey locust trees not doing well in our climate. It's changed just enough, I believe, to see that. And oak trees are just tough to transplant.
Yeah. The only reason I asked that specifically, because we sort of had honey locusts on the list for possible downtown.
Yeah.
See, the ones that we've actually transplanted downtown have done fairly well. So.
You think it's just too hot and dry, getting too hot and dry for them, or?
You know,
Is that the
I think
issue?
it's just a lack of care more than anything else. And then, I think it stays so, it's the springs and summer, early summers have been so wet and that it's very dry in August. And the trees are shocked at the point that they drop their leaves in mid-August to the end of August. And then, you know, now if you drive around, you still see honey locusts with a lot of leaves on them, look great and healthy, but you'll see a lot that don't have any leaves on them. They're still alive, but
Yeah.
so, and then also the other issue is with the honey locust trees, I'd like to move away from them as much as we can, as far as like skyline honey locusts and some varieties, just because they have pretty expandable root systems that seem to want to travel It can cause damage to sidewalks, roadways. and things like that.
Speaking of honey locusts, you know those ones along, I think it's South Union or South Henry by the River Landing, what that, the old folks on there where the hotel used to be?
Yes.
They've had a lot of dead in them for years. Is that canker in those?
Actually, I believe it's, yes, it's too quick. Scale.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are those gonna get pruned or is it?
Probably going to be replaced.
Okay, that's good, because
Are these the new ones that were planted on the south side of that where the bank is so steep?
They were the ones planted along Henry Street.
Oh, okay,
East side of the
okay,
property.
okay.
yeah, because those have been having a rough time for a long time. And that's one reason I asked about the 2-year thing, because they've been in for a couple of years now.
Can I ask about, 2 months ago when we met, I asked you about that big oak tree at the corner of Hefner and,
It's on the schedule. It's just, we are,
so it is something the city
yes,
requires? Okay,
on Hefner and Chestnut.
yeah.
Yeah, oh, I actually have it right away, so. it's-
Oh, see, I wasn't sure about that,
It's
okay.
our tree, however, it's as bad as it looks, it's actually not dangerous at this point because it just failed.
Right, it had leaves on it
Yeah,
a few last
But
year.
it is on the list to be removed.
Okay, okay.
As soon as we can.
So my question before was, I wasn't sure if it was on the right of way or if it was actually in their property.
No, it is.
Okay. Okay,
We actually just removed a large, a section of a large oak, multi-stem oak. It was in a paper alley, and it was a much dangerous situation.
Mhm.
So as for right now, we'll
Yeah.
hold on that other oak tree.
yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else, Doug?
That's all I have.
All right.
Yeah. Can I have ask a question about, I thought I knew what a hazardous tree was, namely a dead and dying tree that poses a potential risk to the public, a safety risk. But you're saying 26 street trees were deemed hazardous trees and were removed. So I'm second guessing my definition now. How do we define hazardous? Is it dead and dying? Is it because it's a potential traffic issue, or how do we define hazardous these days?
Hazardous is defined as, it's an individual situation. A tree such as, could be out in the middle of a park, could be dead and been dead for a period of time and not be as hazardous as a tree that might be dropping small limbs near a school zone. You have to prioritize the targets and the state of the tree. Now, the tree is decayed to the point that, it's going to fall over, and if it falls, it's going to hit cars or pedestrians or homes or damage businesses, then those will be a higher priority. If it's as I said, a tree out in the middle of a park, that very low chance of it damaging anything should it blow over, that's not as hazardous as a tree. We do try to remove as many of the dead trees as we can from streets first. Especially we look at that as if it's dropping limbs, if it's dropping branches, complaints, if it has lifted or heaved side roadways because of the trees leaning to a point that it could topple. That would define a reason to remove it sooner. The tree that was in the paper alley had a huge crack in the base of the trunk, and this was a huge oak tree. And if we had gotten some winds from the east, there was a good chance that we could have lost a tree to the person's home. So you just kind of have to look on an individual basis on the trees and decide how hazardous they are. A good example is the oak tree that just took down Ohio Wesleyan, right in the middle plot up on, right off of Park and Liberty.
I know they have removed a number of trees, but I need to look at that.
There
Yeah.
was a large oak.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
It was dead and actually dropping limbs
Mhm.
to the point, but there were still some leaves on the tree.
Mhm.
But it had gotten to the point that it was dropping limbs, and the liability issues of that tree striking students or coming down and causing damage would be much more important than taking down the pine trees down on or the spruce trees down on the lower section
Mhm.
that have, a couple.
Right,
limbs
yeah.
now. So it's just, you just kind of have to judge it based on what the target and what the potential damage could be from it.
I was actually looking at the question from a slightly different angle. So if I understand you correctly, a hazardous tree is an unhealthy tree, a tree with health issues. A sick tree, a dying tree, a dead tree. Now, my question was slightly different. Can a healthy tree be a hazardous tree? For example, it could be a potential traffic, issue at an intersection, planted too close to something. Is that possible? Do we sometimes define perfectly healthy trees as hazardous trees?
Well, sure, we best example after that is Carson Farms Boulevard and
Yes.
and where we built, what is that street? Ontario Streets, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where it was changed to a four-way stop.
Oh, yeah. There was
We need to
cobblestone,
We
yes.
need to remove a couple of the
Yes,
trees
yes,
so
I-
that the
yeah,
stop signs would be visible.
I remember a case on, I think it was Spring Street. There was an intersection that had a big maple tree in this tree lawn, and traffic and parking.
Parking and safety?
But yeah, thank you. Asked us or recommended it be removed, and I don't know if that was deemed hazardous in the sense that you were talking about, but it certainly was traffic, how it had become a
I
traffic.
think there was one on Park Avenue the
A
same
park,
same
Park,
time.
maybe it was Park,
I
yeah.
remember that too, yeah.
Well, recently, when they were doing the renovations over at Conger, they
Mhm.
planted a tree right in front of a stop sign. I mean, so we had to move that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it just got moved, but
Yeah.
the same situation.
Okay, thank you.
And in that matter also, Tom, the wrong tree planted in the wrong location. also,
Uh-huh.
Putting large maples underneath power lines and things like that. Those trees.
Actually, that happens all the time. Okay. Any other questions for Doug? Okay, then, staff comments, member comments. Do we have any member comments?
I have a couple, maybe.
Okay.
Number one, there's a little article. Now, since school started, my office looks like a battlefield. I've come across some wonderful articles, but I couldn't locate them. But here's one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not to be read now, to be read at a later point. This is actually from the Delaware Gazette. Ash trees are pushed near extinction. So to be read ash tree infestation, the emerald ash borer has been detected in 30 plus states. So, and the ash trees are close to being wiped out. Okay, one other thing. In the Columbus Dispatch, there was an article the other day about bagworms. And there's a little picture, with conifers, needle trees, and, these little, they look like pine cones, but they are bagworms. And that reminded me, my wife walks up and down hike, she exercises. And she keeps telling me that the conifers on South Hawk, they are not the city's responsibility. I think they were planted by developers. But those needle trees, those evergreen trees, according to her, and I've seen it myself, are filled with bagworms. You know, hundreds of little bagworms on every tree. Now, insecticides at this point, you know, are no good. Experts recommend you pick them off by hand and destroy those bags. Now, it's possible to use pesticides once those, you know, eggs hatch next spring in, I think, late June, this article says. But my wife's point was, you know, there are many of these trees are doomed. Once all these little, you know, critters hatch, you know, they will devour the needles, and those trees are likely to eventually succumb, you know, to the pressure. I don't know what to do about it, but it is a potential risk for now. Conifers are not. We don't have any conifers as trees, you know, but we have them in the parks. And it is certainly a risk for private residents. You know, when we have a beautiful blue Bruce tree in our backyard, and we pick off those, you know, those bagworms, and we have it under control. But not everybody may be aware of it, and eventually those, you know, trees will be severely damaged, or they will die. So I just wanted to toss that out. I'm not sure what to do about it. It would be difficult to imagine, you know, a crew of maybe volunteers to go there and pick off by hand thousands of little bagworms. That's probably not reasonable, but I'm not sure what else to do. Give a recommendation, Doug. You know, if you get a call from a resident, you know, hey, I have those bagworms on my tree. What should I do? What do you have a response for them? Or?
Other than picking them off by hand, I would wait until spring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, the problem is seeing them early enough for them to be susceptible to the spray. So once you see the big bags, it's, like you say, it's too late. So getting the timing of the spray is very important.
Well, you may want to spray when the little, you know, eggs hatch, and that is, according to this article, in June, late June. I'm not sure that's right or not.
Sounds about right. It depends on the accumulation of thermal units and all that kind of stuff, and the OSU extension figures all that stuff out, and they can give you times for spraying all kinds of stuff, including bagworms. You know, but each one, if it's a female bagworm, each one of those bags may have 300 to 500 eggs in it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and those trees are loaded.
Yeah.
With bags, yes.
So,
thousands of them.
picking and spraying.
All right. Okay, I have one other last comment, if you don't mind. A general comment about the minutes. At the August meeting, we discussed street trees. And we talked about, you know, Japanese cherry trees, you know, in front of City Hall. So the minutes say a discussion was held regarding the replacement of street trees in the downtown area and appropriate species, you know, quote unquote. Now, this is certainly accurate and fine. And I understand that the true minutes are not the paper copy is not the true minutes. The true minutes, the complete minutes would be the audio recording. But you know, if somebody, so part of my question is, how long do we keep these audio recordings? And the related question, if somebody looks at these minutes in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now, a sentence like this: a discussion was held concerning the street trees in downtown Delaware. I mean, this is meaningless. This doesn't tell anything to anybody. It is true, certainly, but you know, from a historical point of view, you know, from a local history buff point of view, this strikes me as almost too vague. It's not a true And the same goes for other city records as well. You know, city minutes, they're terribly vague. And if you're interested in history, I read a lot of history books. A sentence like this is nutritionally empty. You know, it doesn't say anything. So how long do we keep those audio recordings? And how easy is it to access them? And are they a permanent record?
They're a permanent record. So I can't tell you when. I have to look and see when the actual recordings became the permanent record, but I can look that into for you. But they go into an archive. They are available. If you contact me, I can get you a copy of them. They are purposely made vague for that reason and we can talk about it later if you want. I mean, I can talk about it on the record if you want, but it's more, I can't quote you and everybody and put, you know, Mr. Wilbur feels this or this.
Of course,
So I
yeah,
keep it
yeah.
vague only so you know that the topic was discussed, then you can go back and listen. You know that that was discussed, then you can go back and listen. If you want a more in-depth, that's something we can discuss, but it's more just, so there is a record that was a discussion that was held, but I do not go into details for the fact that I'm not a court stenographer that's taking word for word.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with personalities. It's a philosophical question.
Right.
How specific should minutes be? But I guess the intention is if somebody's interested in the essence and the substance of a discussion, they can go to City Hall and access the records, and they are open and available. They are public records, and the intent is to keep them available forever and ever.
Yes.
Until the next flood
yes.
comes.
The YouTube videos, I cannot answer that because YouTube could shut down technically. So for what we're doing right now for the video recordings, like what you see on YouTube, if you go back, that is not considered a permanent record because we don't own that YouTube.
Yeah. So what is the permanent record then? So I mean, I thought the YouTube videos are the audio recordings.
Permanent record is
Okay.
the audio.
Not the video. I was
No,
just
the video
asking
is
for
just-
clarification.
The video, even though it's not the greatest quality, it's just a bonus.
Okay, all right, good.
It makes it a little bit easier to access for the public,
Uh-huh.
but this is most important. If this was to fail, the minutes would become a lot more in depth.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. That's helpful, yes.
Okay, then, if that is all for the member comments, then we can go on to plan reviews.
The first is the fire station, the proposed fire station. Actually, it's more than proposed, it's actually going to happen. So
It is. This year, I believe they're gonna break ground.
Cheshire and Glen Barkley.
It's right across from Source Point.
Oh, okay, oh, yeah,
Like a roundabout, yeah.
okay.
I only had an objection of 2 trees,
Quercus.
well, they're pin oaks. And pin oaks are just notoriously difficult to mow around, maintain. They just want to continue to grow downwards instead of upwards with their branching. And I was just like to see those changes back over to Shumard oaks or something like that. So other than that, the plant list is on the next page. If anyone has any issues with any plants that they're planning on using.
The only thing, Doug, did they add additional conifers along the western boundary for that, against, near that neighbor, to increase that buffer? I thought I heard that, but not that it means anything on this plan, but I think they also added some conifers in here because there's a neighbor here. but nothing on this plan has changed that, so. It'd just be in addition to what's on this plan.
Yeah, so there's a little more screening
Mhm.
along there. So would these then just switch these to either Shumard or Swan Lake?
Sure, yes.
Okay, that's cool.
Recommendation to change.
So the next is community design law, section 12. We approved this section last, I'll say it was last March.
The Oklahoma land rush.
Yes. So this would be the next section. And again, I just continue with the same trees that we have used in the breakup of this section. So,
Nice, yeah, I like that.
Too low at the intersection?
yes.
What's the growth of that one?
It's horizontal, but it's slow growing. I mean,
Small.
down
I
here,
wasn't thinking it's small. That's fine.
down in the southern Appalachians, they get pretty big, but around here, they.
This is a plan that we are revisiting, Midway Structural.
Yeah, remind us where that is. I couldn't.
This is Pittsburgh Drive.
Oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah, yeah.
And honestly, I don't believe any of the plant material is in the right of way. However, I would highly suggest that they change out the aristocrat pear trees that they're planning on planting. I counted 21 of them to something else. I suggest they would go with like silver lindens along the road and come with tree lilac or something coming up their driveway just to split it up. It is in the city of Delaware, we do not plant any more pear trees in the city right away. So.
Because, why? Because they're susceptible to
Because-
that
No,
black.
it's not, no, it's considered an invasive species.
Okay.
It's hugely invasive.
Okay.
Next spring.
This
when you-
reverts back to, the seeds revert back to the calorie pear.
Okay.
Which, when you drive down the roadways in the mid-spring, you see all that beautiful white bloom that's along the road, it's all calorie pear.
Okay.
And while it's really pretty to look at, it is a nasty, nasty little structure.
Yeah, what's the ONLA stance on that right
It's an
now?
invasive species.
So are nurseries,
They're not banning the planting of these, of pear trees, but well, they have so many, they don't want to,
I mean, if they're in the ground, they're already,
yeah, they're not,
Field
they're not
grown.
saying.
the few ones that are in the field are gonna get dug,
Right,
but they're not gonna plant anymore, like wholesale places aren't.
correct.
Okay. Yeah, these are bad news. The nursery industry did it again.
So they're still for sale, available for sale, you can
Sure.
buy them.
Yeah.
You can still buy Bradford pears.
She likes them.
I like the mine.
It takes a long time for that process to happen. You can still buy a Bradford pear if you wanted to, so. But that would be, again, we really,
Yeah.
we're just making a suggestion at this point to them that they change out the pear trees. The silver lindens will give them, it won't bloom for them, but it'll give them that, maybe a nice silver color that they'll like. Still will be kind of a pyramidal oval shape, oval pyramidal shape, if that's a real thing.
What?
And,
Yeah.
but
It's
not the
real.
same size tree in the end. And then the tree lilacs, obviously, they'll still give them that white bloom, but it'll stay fairly small for their entrances. As far as the rest of the,
Davy was wanting to recommend that they plant.
this
The list
plan
of
came
things.
from Davey. You'd be surprised how many plants I see that still have aristocrat pear trees, Cleveland select pear trees, things like that. Davy does not grow.
I thought maybe that was why they were putting them in the plants, but.
Maybe they're trying to get rid of them,
that's-
looking for.
I can't say that 100%, but I know that, I did not know when I was there, I did not know that the nursery has it, we grew our own.
Okay,
I
well,
didn't see anything else that was like red flags or anything else for, forsythia. I don't know why people want to plant forsythia, but okay.
And it's on recommendation because it's not a grass.
Correct.
okay,
So that would be the second time we've approved these plants.
okay. With,
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're still going.
I'm writing down no pears.
What's that?
Just a lot of
Not
Old,
needle
yes.
cast
Yeah.
and spruce.
Yeah. Most
Yeah,
of the Norway, some blue.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh does not have sidewalks. Yeah, I tried to walk there, but you can walk on private property, no, in these parking lots. Yeah, maybe someday. They should consider a complete street there, with bike lane and sidewalks. On West Center, yes. I've not seen it yet, it's almost complete. I did.
Did a really nice job.
Good. I need to look at that.
Okay, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right.